We live in a slave economy. People might think I'm being extreme saying we live in a slave economy. But what's the difference between a slave owner giving you just enough food to survive and a bed, and a corporation paying you half of what you need to have a place to sleep in the government having to feed you because you don't get paid enough to afford a bed and food? The difference is nothing. People just pretend the money being temporarily passed through our hands makes a difference. Edit update. Instead of responding to every single comment, I'm going to put this update to respond to the people whom I would be repeating myself to. In response to those attempting to say that I am directly equating modern-day wage slavery to chattel slavery of the American pre-industrial period, I am not in any way speaking about the level of suffering imposed upon the slave class. This post is to bring attention to the fact that the structure we live under in modern America is exactly the same structure as any other form of slavery in the world. If you provide labor, you are given just enough to live. If you deny your labor, there are severe consequences imposed on you. Consequences are consequences. I'm not going to have a conversation or start one about something as subjective as comparing one form of suffering to another. That is a moral and philosophical conversation separate from this one. They found a better system. It's always about control. Don't be absurd. Slaves are valuable property to their owners. We are disposable. But nobody in the comments seems to know about wage slavery or the fact that there are as many kinds of slavery as there are kinds of historical societies. Chattel slavery isn't the only kind of slavery. Hell, a few of the guys in Plato's dialogues hanging out with Socrates were slaves. Slavery takes many forms, and one of them is wage slavery. No kidding, we outlawed slavery and rebranded it for the masses. The most well-behaved prisoner is the one who believes he is free. Economic slavery or financial slavery. It's called wage slavery. People in the 1800s had a big problem with it. They called it just a couple steps above chattel slavery. A majority of people thought that those that worked in the factories should own the factories. It took a long time of corporate and government propaganda to beat that saying out of people's heads. I thought this the other day. I've been working since I was 16. Now 35. So almost 20 years. I've worked for big corporations and small privately owned businesses. This entire time, I've lived mostly paycheck to paycheck and have made the owners of the business very wealthy. Right now, I like where I work, but I'm struggling to survive and the owner is spending 2 weeks in Spain. So I'm having to work extra hours doing some of his work as well as mine. I can't wait until my apprenticeship is over and I'm going to be working for myself. I'm tired of my labor making everyone wealthy except myself. We're born already in debt to them and give them free money our entire lives. https www.businessinsider.com/companies pocket largest profits and 70-year summit inflation complaints 2021-12. https www.oxfamamerica.org/press/amid-record inflation Oxfam research finds more than 50 million US workers earn less than 15 per hour. The money was all appropriated for the top in the hopes that it would trickle down to the needy. Mr. Hoover didn't know that money trickled up. Give it to the people at the bottom and the people at the top will have it before night. Anyhow, but it will at least have passed through the poor fellow's hands.
Will Rogers.
Wage slavery is real, not to mention the actual slaves in the corrections system. And free Americans compete with civic inmates for jobs in some areas. Funny. If you make too much, then the government won't even help you eat. Which is basically $30,000 a year for 2 people. So you can't afford to eat or live. Yep. And just as enslaved people can often never earn or buy their freedom, no amount of corporate profits sent off as dividends will ever pay off shareholders and free the workers. How is that extreme? No one is able to tell me work or die isn't just slavery with extra steps. How does Dr. Wolf put? First we had the master-slave relationship. Then came lord-serf. And now we have employer-employee. In that sense, yeah, the overall structure has not changed at all. Except now, the chains are made of debt and the need for healthcare, instead of iron. Housing crisis. Housing is a basic need. Like water and air for every human. Today's economy turned housing into an investment product. As such, nowadays you need to give more than 50% of your disposable income just to have a roof on top of your head. Also, if you lose your job, all your savings are evaporating just because of your rent. I call this dependency on a job, just to cover a basic need. Very close to slavery. There's a word for what we're going through which specifically differentiates it from chattel slavery. We call it wage slavery, which is, as you described, a situation where a person is only working for basic sustenance and effectively earns only the basics needed for survival without ever seeing the excess value of their labor. It is directly comparable to chattel slavery insofar as the wage slave typically doesn't have a choice in the matter and has no ability to save resources needed to quit the current job and coast until they get paid from a new one. You're free to choose to be homeless instead. Just like a chattel slave was free to attempt to flee the plantation and face extreme consequences. Sure, the consequences are worse than homelessness, but it's still comparable. But it's worse than that. We're only talking about here in the Western world. We have wage slaves here, but there are absolutely still chattel slaves out there. And our economy does depend on them too. Our comfort and cheap gas and imported luxuries almost all rely on slavery of some sort in some other country where there aren't any human rights protections. And those countries aren't protecting their citizens' human rights because they are effectively colonized by Western imperialists who want to keep the prices of goods and labor low so they can continue to live extraordinarily luxurious lives on the back of the third world poor. Smedley Butler said it best. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 19,021,912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. It's been that way for a long time. It's just gotten worse. George Carlin was talking about this 30 years ago. Honestly, he touched on it during his whole career after he stopped doing TV-safe material. My poverty, not my will, consents.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.